Hello and welcome. We are with Mr. Suhail Nathani of ELP. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Three things that could change, the regulatory environment of India in a very dramatic way.
Okay. One, a strong executive. We're already on the way over there. An executive who not only has the ability to make the changes, but to carry them through Parliament, because we suffered from what I would refer to as legislative lethargy over the last decade. No bills were getting passed. They were getting passed in a very acrimonious manner. There were more days of boycott than productive work. I think that is one, that we have good executive. Two, we have a judiciary that, in a manner of speaking, and with no disrespect, recedes into the role that was originally envisaged to them, which is uphold the laws and the constitution of the country rather than step in where there is a void that the executive has left. So the Supreme Court in the last few years has had to step in where there has been just abuse of executive power. So that hopefully will change with a strong executive. Of course, there will always be a area of interface, but I'm sure both institutions are mature enough to keep that within limits. Two, of course, I said the court. And three, just professional management. We need entrepreneurs who are better at managing their business than managing the government. And I think these three things will go a long way.
Okay, so the regulatory environment, can get better. What about the regulations themselves? Do you think that regulations now need to be tuned in to sort of take into account that, VUCA is here to stay?
VUCA is here to stay in a limited sense. So VUCA, as we understand it in global companies, is moving technology, geopolitical issues. So there is an event in the Middle East that spikes oil prices, or new technologies come out that has wiped out the old technology. Those are VUCAs that businesses are trained and ought to be used to handling, and should be very good at handling, because those companies who can stay ahead of those, i.e. in today's example, the Apples, the Googles, they manage to stay ahead of the curve. The other VUCA, as we begin to understand it in India, is the regulatory uncertainty, and that needs to stop. There is no need for that to continue. Honestly, the day India has a budget which is a non-event, which is only a balance sheet of the government spend, we will have arrived. But where we are today, where everybody is looking for policy announcements and make it such a big event, that is the VUCA that really needs to go away, because that is caused by uncertain regulation. People are looking for favors, benefits, favoritism, special status, whatever else in the budget. Really, there's no need to be that way.
Do Indian regulators need to, keep pace with the changing times then?
So it's impossible for a regulator to keep pace. Honestly, the day the regulator keeps pace with industry or with innovation, we're in big trouble. The regulator always will play catch up. The question is, what mindset do you have for a regulator? So if you have a regulator who says this is black and this is white, then the story is pretty much over. But if you have a regulator who within limits uses his discretion in a manner that furthers business, I think that is the ideal situation. Though it's easier said than done. We are in a situation where we are emerging from a point where even good faith decisions made by bureaucrats and regulators have come under question. So, you make a business decision, you say, okay, I'm going to give this guy a loan. Tomorrow the bank goes bankrupt and some CBI inquiry comes up and says, oh, why did you give him a loan? Why did you sign off? That environment is not good for regulation.
So, what kind of a regulator then, in your mind, would be a good regulator that is sort of pragmatic in some way?
So, the kind of regulator who is pragmatic needs to be a well-informed regulator. Absolutely, this is not even an issue that we need to discuss. An absolutely honest regulator, which we have several of in the country. And three, a regulator that is empowered. And when I say empowered, I mean supported by the entire ecosystem. That yes, whatever the decision, good or bad, the decision was made in the best good faith and in a manner that furthers the cause of India. The moment a regulator thinks that if I sign this off, somebody is going to ask me a question, or I should not sign this off if nobody takes care of me, That's the problem. If somebody says, I'm making this signature and I'm doing it in the best interest of India, I think that is the best regulator we can have.
Would you give me an example of perhaps like a regulator that actually somehow or somewhere meets these kind of standards?
So, unfortunately, I would struggle to give you an example for no other reason, because we are in such a vitiated environment. In the early days, in the early 90s, there were several regulators that way. The FIPB was set up that way. So the FIPB would take a decision, would stand by the decision. It was the position of the government of the day, and that would move on. Look how the FIPB functions today. Every ministry gets a chance to comment. People are passing, I hate to say this, but people are passing the buck more than standing up and saying, okay, I will take that decision. So that is just a sign of the times. That will change. There are many regulators. I believe SEBI is a regulator that way. Look at the controversial decision SEBI has made in many cases. You think there was no political pressure? There was probably absurd political pressure. Look at the Competition Commission of India. Has rightly, wrongly, you may argue with the legal proposition, but you can't argue that the fines that are being imposed in the best interest of the consumer. And they are absurdly high fines. You may fault how they have calculated the numbers, but you can't fault the decision. These are new generation regulators. What are the changes? There are more than one regulator, so it's a panel. Two, there's a professional body of people who are actually managing this. And three, they welcome and are open to scrutiny.
Moving on to IFRS. We've been talking about IFRS for the longest time in India. And, even as we speak, people are still waiting for IFRS, to start following IFRS. How do you think, Indian companies can convert this, as an opportunity for themselves?
So, I'm not an accountant by training, but I can tell you this, that as Indian companies become more and more global, IFRS becomes absolutely critical. You can follow and you will follow an Indian accounting standard, but if you're going to raise capital globally, if you're going to have subsidiaries whose accounts you're going to subsume globally, honestly, you need to have IFRS, and that is the biggest opportunity. When you go out and use your own company, your own stock as currency, then you need to have IFRS compatible accounts where you can go talk to companies, you can do mergers, you can do acquisitions on the strength of your stock. And today, all this is being held back.
Would it also sort of become cumbersome for Indian companies to follow so many, standards?
So, from what I understand, the Indian accounting standard and the IFRS are a lot closer than where Indian GAAP and IFRS is. You can't move to a standard immediately. It's not like a light switch. You wake up one morning and say, look, here is IFRS, take it or leave it. Two things have happened in India. One, the change needs to be gradual and slow so that the impact is spread out over a period of time, because it's going to be a painful transition. And two, there are a lot of vested interests, or if you will, groups and positions where you don't want to move to an IFRS because the old system suits you very well. Then you sort of resist it and say, no, this is not proper, that is not proper.
But it is an eventuality now. People will have to actually just accept it and move on.
Payal, the way I approach these kind of things is that you can look at isolation. Is this an eventuality? Do people have to accept? The bottom line here is that, is it an eventuality that India needs to be creating the most number of jobs in the world over the next 2 decades? For that, they have to take their rightful place in the global economy. Today, we are less than 2 or 3% of the world's trade, but we are 15 to 20% of that population. 1 out of 6 people in the world is of Indian origin. You can't have this anomaly. And there is no option. If you want to be in a global player, either you become the change or you join the system. And there's no other option, the way I look at it.
All right, Mr. Nathani, thank you so much for joining us.